The night in Arles did not behave like other nights. It breathed. Vincent knew this because he could feel it pressing against his skull, swelling and contracting like a living lung. The stars did not rest in their places. They churned, twisted, and conspired. Even before he lifted his brush, the sky had already decided to move. He stood at the window of the yellow house long after the lamps had been extinguished, his body rigid with vigilance that bordered on devotion. Sleep was impossible. Sleep was a small death, and Vincent had already been born into one. Instead, he watched. He listened. The dark hummed with a sound he could never quite describe in words, but knew instinctively how to translate into color. Blue would not suffice. It had to be ultramarine, bruised and vibrating. Yellow could not remain gentle. It must blaze like a wound that refused to close. He painted as if warding something off. Earlier that evening, Gauguin's chair had remained empty, its woven seat sagging with accusation. The room still carried the echo of raised voices. Words hurled not to wound but to survive. Vincent had spoken too fast, thought too loudly, and loved too intensely. He always did. Gauguin had stared at him with that measured gaze, the kind that catalogued and judged, and Vincent had felt himself slitting under it, like wet wood under pressure. Why must everything fracture when I wish only to build, he thought. The colony had been a dream, no, a salvation, a brotherhood of painters bathed in sun and purpose. But dreams, Vincent had learned, carried their own teeth. And by nightfall, Gauguin was gone, and Vincent did not follow. Instead, he turned inward, where the damage had already lived. The canvas waited. He approached it with reverence and terror, as though it might recoil from him if handled incorrectly. His hands trembled, not from uncertainty, but from excess. Too much sensation pressed behind his eyes, each thought arriving fully formed and demanding release. The brush became a conductor, the only instrument capable of siphoning the noise out of his head. Stroke after stroke, the world rearranged itself. The cypress rose like a black flame, a dark prayer clawing upward. The village huddled beneath the sky, obedient and small, its steeple pointing heavenward with naive confidence. And above it all, the firmament convulsed. Not chaotic, but ordered in a language only Vincent could read. This was not the night as it appeared, but the night as it was felt. Later, how much later he could not say, his body failed him. The collapse was not sudden. It came as a soft, terrible inevitability, like a tide that had always intended to return. Thoughts folded inward. Sounds sharpened, and the room tilted. Vincent clung to the table as if it might anchor him to the world. He would later remember the blade as cold and oddly gentle. The pain arrived after the fact, trailing behind like an afterthought. But he felt, first, was relief, a silencing, and for a moment the storm paused. Blood warmed his fingers. Somewhere in the city a woman would scream at the sight of him, but Vincent would not hear it. He was already far away, drifting in that quiet space between intention and regret, but he had not meant to die. He had only meant to stop. They locked him away after that. White walls, narrow beds, days punctured by screams not his own, until they were. In Saint-Rémy, Vincent learned the architecture of confinement intimately. The windows barred the countryside into fragments, olive trees twisted just beyond reach, their silver leaves shimmering like unfinished sentences. Yet even there, madness did not silence him, it only sharpened him. When the fits receded, he painted with a fury that frightened the doctors. Fields buckled under his brush, irises screamed blue against the earth. The sky returned again and again, always restless and always watching him back. He wrote to Theo in the evenings, his handwriting tightening with his thoughts that grew dark. "I am afraid that my mind will betray me entirely," he confessed. "But when I paint, I feel briefly whole." In the end, it was not the asylum that broke him. It was hope. Auvers offered the illusion of recovery. Open fields, fresh air, a doctor who spoke gently and looked at him too long. Vincent worked as if possessed, each painting an act of defiance against the narrowing of time. Wheat fields, crow-black skies, roots tearing themselves out of the ground. On a July afternoon, with the heat pressing low and merciless, he carried a revolver into the fields. The wheat whispered around him, unconcerned. And when the shot rang out, even the birds paused. Vincent passed 2 days later in a small room, his brother's hand clasped tightly in his own. There was no grand revelation at the end, only exhaustion. The storm had finally burned itself out. But the sky he painted never rested. It still turns and watches, and somewhere inside its spiraling blues and violent yellows, Vincent remains, awake, aching and utterly alive.